Hi, everyone, and welcome to PA Podcast Episode 8. I'm really excited about today because I have a special guest. Now, I do say that often, but today really, not that all of the rest of my guests were not special, but today I have a special guest, none other than Amin Khoury, or Amin Khoury, however you
However you
want
want
me,
to say it.
right? How do you want me to say it? How do you know what? Why don't you introduce yourself?
Already from the beginning like that?
Yeah,
I
go
thought
for
you had
it.
a whole introduction for me planned out.
Yeah.
I was waiting to say, well, that's I couldn't have said it better.
All right, you know what? Let me reintroduce you. I have a special guest here today, Amin Khoury. All right, or Amin Khoury, whatever you want, or however you want to however you want to pronounce it, rather. Right? What's special about Amin? I'll tell you. So Amin was actually one of my notaries, and we did many transactions together. So he is a notary by trade who decided that he's passionate. He's a passionate entrepreneur, and he decided to go into the mortgage business. And he let go of his notarial practice to do this. And now he has his own mortgage business. This is what he does. He's one of my mortgage brokers, and we've done many transactions together. It's gone great. He owns real estate as well, if it's okay for me to say that.
No problem.
Very fascinating individual, I gotta say. And it is an
you.
honor to have you here today. Thank
It's
you
an
for
honor
coming.
to be here. I appreciate you to the point where you got me on social media. I would have not done this for anyone else than you. So very happy to be here, and
I appreciate that.
hopefully I make you proud and your audience gets something interesting out of this.
Listen, your friendship makes me proud.
Well,
right?
thank you.
Just that alone. That's all I need. And I'm sure people want to hear this because you're probably the only person who's basically a lawyer, right? Really is what you are, specialized in notarial practice. And how, after years, a successful notarial business, might I add, what is it that really, like, c'est quoi qui a déclenché ça? What is it that did that for you, you know? What is it that made you take that leap to go, you know what? I want to go from being a notary to handling another business. I mean, you had your own business as a notary, but now going into the mortgage business. What brought that on?
It's a good question. Actually, a lot of people ask me that. I always kind of answer a bit differently to everyone, but you know what? We're here. I'm going to spill the beans and actually give you the whole truth. So it kind of makes maybe a bit more sense because actually I became a notary a bit by a chain of events, me thinking I'm taking the right decisions to make my parents happy, but throughout the whole way, actually disappointing them step by step, which led me to become a notary.
Disappointing them.
They're immigrant parents, right? So they don't know they're happy about something until you change, and then they realize that they were happy about it before. But basically, I became a notary because I wanted to get into real estate somehow.
Okay.
My whole life, my dad wanted me to be a doctor.
Yes, of course.
Pretty much
Just like all of us.
all immigrant dads out there. And then at some point in Sec 5, I realized I just don't have it in me. So for many reasons, one, don't have the grades, horrible at math, I can't stand the sight of blood. So already there, it's a bad start.
A couple of red flags there.
So I'm like, you know what? I want to go into law.
Yeah.
Which was pretty much the only respectable program that you don't need math to get into.
Especially as an immigrant child.
Basically.
Very important.
I'm like, you know what, on my end, they'll give me 3-4 years to kind of figure out really what I want to do. I'll go through law school, and then maybe my parents will be happy. But my dad heard through the branches that there's something even better than law. It's called international law, which doesn't exist. There's no program to go into international law.
Okay.
So I told him, yeah, I'm doing international law, the whole thing. So then when I finished law school, had to decide whether I'm going to the bar. So for everyone out there that doesn't know what's the difference between a notary and a lawyer, really the only difference is that a notary can't represent a client in court. A notary has to be impartial, so has to represent the buyer and the seller or both parties to always find a middle ground, whereas a lawyer has to represent his party against someone else. So being a lawyer wasn't for me. I'm like, you know what, notary makes sense, and at the same time, it is real estate. So by the time I figure out how to get more involved into real estate, I'll become a notary, and we'll see how it goes. Flash forward 7 years of working as a notary, the business grew. I was really lucky to have good contacts and for the business to grow step by step. But honestly, I never found that it was my true calling. What I wanted to do was real estate somehow. Mais je suis rentré comme par la bande, which is a weird band to get into because
Yeah.
actually it was a lot longer than just doing my real estate license or mortgage broker license from the beginning. But in my head, I felt maybe that way my parents would be happy about what I've done, so I can show them that, look, I have the diploma, everything's taken care of, and at the same time I can end up doing what I actually wanted to do, which was to be more involved in the whole nitty-gritty of the real estate transaction and not the final steps or the closing
Right.
of the transaction.
And it's so, first of all, I just want to say that, right? Because you're saying that your parents wanted international law, and then you went into notary. International law, I guess, would be, maybe that's the avenue. Maybe that's why Amal Clooney chose international law. Maybe her parents wanted
Maybe
her
it could be
to go
actually.
into.
It could
And
be.
were they wrong? I mean, she got to marry George Clooney. I guess. I guess it
But
brought her somewhere.
so there is such a thing as international law where you practice law in between countries, but in the Lebanese community, it seemed like a lot of kids were telling their parents that they were studying international law, which is it's not a real thing. But to make a very long story short, I'm
And
sure
that's
she's
what all the parents would go in and tell their friends.
basically.
My son is studying international law.
Basically. So when I told them I'm going to become a notary for my dad, he's like, well, you're basically a librarian. Like a notary just sits in an office and you
Oh
just
my God.
have books around you and papers and stuff.
It only takes you, what, 4 or 5 years of,
Yeah, basically.
studying at university, right?
Yeah. But he discovered that notary wasn't so bad the day I told him I'm becoming a mortgage broker. Then he's like, what are you doing? It's the best job you have in notary. You can't leave this to go become
Yeah,
a
so
mortgage broker.
suddenly it was
The best job ever.
job.
Like, you're so stupid. Can't believe you're doing this. Anyone that has a chance to become a notary wouldn't do anything else. But now he's pretty happy with what I'm doing. So
Oh, that's okay. I think they come around.
yeah,
right?
yeah, they always do.
I have somewhat of a similar story because now I wasn't a lawyer. I mean, or I didn't go into law. I think my parents would have loved it if I went into law, but that's not the avenue I chose. I was at the bank at the time, and I was studying accounting. And then my mom, she was okay with it, but then what do you say? She's like, my son is studying accounting. He is manager at BMO. Very good, very nice, very nice, very good manager. He's manager. And at the time, I was a financial services manager. That was my title, right? Which is the same thing as a financial services representative. So, those are little things that I think that immigrant parents in general, they kind of like.
The title is
The
important.
title is important, right? The title is important to make.
And they're the
parents.
experts of making it sound
Yes.
better than what it is.
Yes. I think the experts in our domain in real estate, that really exists where everyone is trying to make things sound more than they are,
Yes.
right? So, but that was a bit my experience with that. And I graduated in accounting, and similar to you, I gave the piece of paper to my parents and I said, leave me alone. I did this and I'm done.
Did
Right.
you ever work as an accountant, or did you
I did
decide to
not.
switch right away after?
No,
finishing?
I didn't. I mean, look, I told myself I'm never going to touch anything accounting related again. But
Really?
now, I deal with financial statements all the time with regards to condos, right? So when it comes to condos, I'm the one who's really evaluating these things like in depth. And
Which
I
makes
guess,
a huge difference because if you don't know what you're looking at,
well, you have
like,
to
it-
know.
yeah, it
Right.
makes
You
a
have to
huge difference for
understand what
clients,
you're
yeah.
looking at. You have to understand but I mean, to me, it seems like it's second nature to understand what profitability and losses on the financial statements. Like those are things to look at where
Mm.
your costs are going, what to anticipate moving forward, and all of these new laws too. Right now with the self-insurance fund and all those things. So, but what's curious to me is, so I did this, I'm like, okay, ciao. Like I gave my piece of paper and I have it on my wall and it cost me some money and that's what I have it there for. But you did it at the peak of your business, right? Which is
Yes.
probably very intelligent too, because you were able to sell your business at the time. But you did it at the peak of your business. So that's, I think, one of my biggest curiosities is how is it that you go from now seeing this successful business? And I'm really curious because I'm not saying that you did something wrong. It's actually quite encouraging to see
Mm.
because many people do not take any steps to take any risks. Now, the ultimate risk is having such a successful business and then saying, okay, I'm going to take a whole different turn.
Yeah.
And, first of all, if I may ask, how long did it take you to do that? And then second of all, how did you really take that leap of faith?
Yeah. It, it was hard. It was many years in the making, like thinking about it, actually fantasizing about the day that I would just leave the keys to the office and just wrap it up. I really think for me, for many years, I I'd feel bad being ungrateful about what I had built, and I kept trying to force myself through like so many different ways, like listening to motivational podcasts and stuff like that. People saying, be grateful about everything to try to find meaning to what I was doing. But when you're not doing what you really feel you're supposed to be doing, it's a sad life
Yeah,
to live. So when I started off my business, I liked the whole idea of going and getting clients and building it up to something. And then you start having different problems finding employees, managing people, and also working on your business and growing it. So every time I would think, you know what, once I get an assistant, then probably she'll take off, she or he. In my case, it was always girls that worked with me. I thought I'd be able to alleviate the pain points of my business, and then I'd find what I like doing about it and be able to only do that. But every step of the way, the business was growing, and I was realizing that I'm still not really happy with what I'm doing, but I feel bad not being grateful about it because a lot of people would be very happy
yeah.
to have that. And then it became when I reach a certain amount of money per year, I'll be happy. Got there, went over it. Next year, I'm like, maybe it's this amount of money that would make me happier, and then this amount of money, and
It was never the money.
no, because at some point I really realized, you know what, I'm actually not even looking at my bank account because I'm making all this money to hopefully one day stop working as a notary. So I'm like, then fundamentally there's something wrong if all my reason for working is for me to stop working.
I
Like
understand.
there, and I was working in the agency
Yeah,
with you guys, and the smallest thing. So just seeing like a lot of the agents be able to leave the office in the middle of the day and go for a visit and come back and like have the day broken up, and it felt like from the outside like you were more a master of your time, whereas I was at the office from morning to night. And the more the business grew, the more I was at the office all the time, up to a point where I was just always at the office, always doing paperwork, which is what clients don't see. They never see the back
no,
end.
and I saw that. I saw that
Yeah.
because you were right next to me at the office. I'll tell you very honestly. Look, I work with great notaries, and the couple of notaries that I work with regularly are great. Now, it was a hard blow for me to lose you as a notary.
I'm sorry to hear that,
It
but
really was, and I'm not the only one who feels this way. And sometimes we discuss it. We're like, where is Amin? We need Amin back as a notary. But I respect your decision. I respect, the avenue you took. And especially in that moment that you took it. And it's interesting what you're telling me because it's true that, the cliche that money doesn't buy happiness is true.
it
And
is.
we've
Yeah.
seen it. I've seen it with, my extremely successful clients. You know, and even for ourselves during the pandemic, these were better financial years for us, but they were very hard personal years for us.
Yep.
And this is, to your point, what people don't necessarily see. They don't see the background of everything that's happening.
No, that's it. And from the outside, like I would hear people say, you know what, real estate agents are killing it right now. They just need to open the door and wait for offers to be thrown in. And agents were sitting in their car just with the window open and people throwing their offers. But the fact is, I'm sure you guys were working 10 times more, losing 10 times more deals than you were before.
100%.
Like the amount of work that had to be done to be able to close the deals changed everything. There were still great years for everyone that was out there and doing
They were
the effort.
great. Again, I go back to it. I never want to go back to that time. There were great financial years, right? Like financially, sure, there were great years, but then it comes with its headaches. Now you have to keep hiring to just keep up the pace. If you're somewhat of a perfectionist, like I am a perfectionist, anybody who knows me will know this about me. And if you're really trying to do over and above for everyone and everything, you have no time left on your hands.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that balance is extremely difficult, especially if you have a family.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you don't want to let your clients down because they've really entrusted you with something.
Yeah.
You don't want to let your family down because they're your family. And then you're like, well, this is supplying this for my family right now.
Yeah, it's finding a middle ground, but there's never really a middle ground.
There's never a middle ground.
It's either the client or your family, and at the same time, your clients end up kind of becoming your family, especially like I see how you work with your clients. They can call you at any time, and the transactions will drag, and towards the end of the transaction, they really feel like, you know what, I've been dealing with Puria for 5-6 months. Like I can call him at any time. I'll call him on a Saturday. I'll call him on a Sunday for sure. Like we're friends. We're practically cousins at this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a very overbearing job, whereas you can't just close the door, leave, and that's it. Like real estate is.
And that's what people don't necessarily understand. Now, look, I understand it on a client's perspective. When things are happening, they're super nervous.
Yeah.
For me, it's my day to day. I live and breathe real estate all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But to clients, this is a one-time transaction, sometimes a second time. Now, if you have regular investors, it's a different story. But a lot of these people, it's, these transactions happen rarely.
Mm-hmm.
It's everything to them.
Yeah.
And in their mind frame too, this is probably going to be one of the bigger investment pieces of their lives.
Of course. Yeah.
Hence why there is so much emotion that goes into it. Where I have to actually come in and detach the emotions for people.
Yeah.
And that is, in essence, one of the bigger challenges, that we see, because it's hard for me to tell a client, detach your emotions. Let's say if they're in love with a house.
Yeah.
They're in love, they see it. It's hard for me to tell them, guys, let's take a step back, right? Hard is one thing. It's hard because I also need to make a decision for them in a sense. What I tell my clients will influence them.
Because they entrust you, and I'm sure oftentimes they'll just ask you, like, what do you think we should do?
Yeah.
And like just that answer is going to change their whole life, basically.
It does.
So
it changes their whole life. It changes whether or not they get the house.
yeah. And I can say it because I've told you that once.
Yeah.
I remember a phone call. I'm like, well, I believe in you. And that's it. So like when the client closes for having lived it, you close the phone and then you're like, oh yeah, Puria got it. Puria's got it. I
have all the stress, right? And that's what happens is, my client's like, well, we trust you with it. Go for it, right? Now, in the meantime, if I lose that deal, let's say, if I'm in a circumstance where I have to make a decision, and that decision can make or break
It's huge.
the deal, and at the same time, it's that decision that will also get the best deal for the client.
Yeah.
Now, I have to be very careful how I navigate that. Hence why I'm so conservative. And I tell my clients, listen, I believe we should do X. But understand that by doing this, we may lose the deal. Now, in the worst case scenario, I want you to be okay with that. Because I believe in those. And look, 99% of the time, I know that's a high percentage, but regularly, like I know how to navigate that and I'll save the deal, right? That 1% of the time, it's possible. So we always have to factor in these contingencies
Yeah.
for clients because, yes, people trust me a lot and I appreciate that trust a lot, by the way. I do not take that for granted. That's why it's so difficult for me. But it's a part of my job. I love it. I mean, as you've seen, even on the notary side, you've seen me with my clients. I love negotiating. I love
You're
the art of
super involved.
negotiation.
That's the big differentiator between really, really good agents, and bad agents. If you're involved from the beginning to the end and you don't feel like, okay, I'm done my part of the job, now I'm going to relay to the next professional and then onto the notary, whatever happens, the notary knows what he's doing. Like the clients actually really believe more in their broker than the notary. And that was one of the things that I hated the most as a notary was actually during closings when you'd be telling something to the client and then they just turn around and look at their agent and just confirm. They're like, is it's really true. What he's saying? And then if the agent goes,
it's true.
They're like, okay, we'll sign whatever you're saying. They meet the notary during the last week of their transaction. They're with you from the beginning for weeks, months, sometimes years, looking for properties. So it is important to be there from the beginning to the end, definitely.
And it's funny because realistically, it's the notaries that know all this. I have to say this because many people take the notary's job for granted.
Yeah.
And I remember when the fees for notaries went up and everybody was complaining. We have to understand that just 5 years ago, notary fees were less than $1,000 in some cases.
Yeah.
Now we're bordering two.
Close to.
Right. Yeah. So they've doubled in this time frame.
Which is a testament to my horrible timing in anything that has to do with investment. I left the profession right before. I wrote a huge letter to the Chamber of Notaries. I'm like, you guys are never going to change, the worst profession ever.
Yeah.
The fees, this is that. Then left, sure enough, 2 months later, everything changed.
Everything kind of
But it would have
changed.
still not done a difference.
It wouldn't have because money is not what drove you.
It is not, no.
It's not what drove you to this decision. But I hear this complaint and I tell all my clients the same thing. I'm like, guys, these are the people who make sure that the deeds are clean, that the titles are clean.
That it's your house.
It's your home.
Yeah.
You want to make sure this is all the legality of your home. I bring it to this point, but the finish line is the notary. And the notary is the one who actually protects you legally.
And that is next on the line too. So whatever happens,
they're absorbing that risk.
There's a huge responsibility.
And then you're complaining because you're paying $1,000 to a notary. I mean, look, now close to $2,000, but $1,000, it's nothing for a lifetime of.
But even 2,000, when you really think about it and you put it in perspective.
But that's what I'm saying.
Like houses now, a condo's worth 400, 500,000. A house can be worth 8, 9, $1 million, even more. We're talking less than 0.5% of what you're willing to pay on this house. You're probably going to spend more on a couch than what you're going to pay this notary.
100%.
So it is important.
Unfair.
Yeah, it's in a sense. Look, now, tant mieux, the fees are going up and it represents better the actual work that comes with the transaction, which is great. But people have to know the responsibility that notaries have with every transaction is gigantic. If a mortgage broker or real estate agent does 20 or 30 transactions a year, it's excellent. It's a good year.
And they don't understand either that there is not, you don't actually go and pocket that $2,000. You have all these fees you have to
there's
pay.
So many fees, but that's why I'm horrible at math. When I did my calculation, getting into notary, like becoming a notary, I'm like, okay, perfect. I asked a few people, I'm like, how much does it cost to go to the notary? Like back then, $975 all in. I'm like, okay, how long does it take? Like I just saw the notary for 30 minutes. Perfect. 30 minutes a day. If I work 10 hours a day, I can do 20 transactions a day. 975, I'm crushing. I'm gonna make $1 million in my
Yeah.
first year. Nope.
No, all those hours, all that paperwork, all of
Totally.
that. And I remember because I saw you in the office and I would do long hours and you were right there with me
Yeah.
and, still going through it. And these are big documents. People take it for granted because they think that these are just templates that you just put in the address and it finishes. No.
No.
And this is actually something that's very unique for you as a mortgage broker
Yeah.
because you've done all of these deed of loans. You know the nitty gritty of every single financial institution. I'm not singling out any of them, okay? But we know that there are so many fine prints with regards to every bank.
Yeah.
And sometimes when the rates are excellent, there's a lot of fine prints with regards to that.
Yeah.
When you sell, if you cancel, all of these things. And these are not just standard penalties.
No.
There's a lot more at stake to them. And that's something that is a real differentiating factor for you as a mortgage broker, as somebody who has a mortgage business, because when people come to you, and that's something that I love when I send my clients to you, is that I know that whatever they're going to do with regards to mortgage, if in 2-3 years time, if they've decided that they want to do a 5-year rate, which right now, so many people are deciding this just because of the rate percentage, because it's lower. And I'm fearing 3 years from now, because these people, a lot of them are like, no, we're going to be here for 5 years. And I tell all of them, you may not. So understand what you're doing. Okay, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But when we get to that bridge, if in 3 years you need to sell because of X, Y, or Z reasons, you need to upsize because you have a new baby, you need to downsize because you're retiring, you need to change cities because, you don't want to deal with the language laws, whatever it is. We're not going to get into that. We're not going to get into that. But whatever it is, I know that Amin knows all these banks because he's done thousands of deed of loans.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he kind of has an edge on that. And I think that's probably the reason why, now correct me if I'm wrong, why you decided to be a mortgage broker so you could work with, 50 financial institutions and you can direct the client based on their circumstances.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when I decided to switch and to figure out what I want to do next, so I can't go into anything that I haven't done in years. So I have no social media whatsoever. So I can't rebrand myself as a marketing guru or anything. So I'm like, okay, what do I know? I know mortgages. I've been doing hundreds of transactions a year. I read back and forth all the institutions, all types of mortgages and all that. So I'm like, I spend my time explaining to clients when it's too late, because people have to understand when you're at the point of the notary, really the way it should work is that the notary should come first so he could explain to the clients the repercussions of whatever they're about to consider committing with the bank and signing with the bank.
Yeah.
The notary comes at the end when everything is already done. And if the buyer doesn't go through with the transaction, odds are the seller is going to sue him, the agents are going to sue him. So once you're there and you're at the point of the notary, I'll explain to you everything, but it's too late for you to change your mind.
Right.
Pretty much. So that's why I found that I would have way more value being at the front end and being able to explain to the clients from the beginning, guys, this bank has these conditions, this bank has these other conditions. Like you said, if it's a couple that's getting married and they're buying a condo downtown, a 3.5, the chances are pretty big that you guys are going to want to upsize in 2 or 3 years. Because once you have a baby or two, that 3.5 feels extremely small. So you know what? Maybe a 5-year fixed isn't your best solution right now. Because like you said, you're going to be stuck in it. Your penalty is going to be so big that whatever you think you're saving on your interest right now, you're going to get destroyed on the end of the deal when you break the mortgage. Now there's different conditions also with the banks. So some banks, the penalties are way lower than the other banks. There's so many different conditions, but there's really a product suited for everyone out there. And that's why for me, I felt like I could make a bigger difference and help more people as a broker instead of as a bank rep specifically.
So somebody who's dealing with rates and banks every day, where do you, and I know that this is a loaded question, but where do you see the rates going in 2024?
So I'm actually extremely conservative compared to a lot of other people that I'm talking to. There's so many different factors, but to make a long story short, for me, the rates in 2024 are either going to stay the same and stabilize slowly to the downside. So we are already seeing the fixed rates trickle down slowly. Variable is still held by the Bank of Canada because, in a sense, they are aware of everything that's happening around the world. So we can't close our eyes to what's happening in the States. It is an election year. So everyone has advantage of keeping the economy rolling and going, and it
Yeah.
makes us feel like, you know what, maybe we passed the recession. Maybe it's not as bad as we think, which I think is not the case. But then again, I'm not an expert. I can just say what I think. So for me, 2024 is going to be a stable year because everyone's kind of on standby waiting to see what's going to happen next. But what I think will happen is that as soon as we get that first rate cut, I think a lot of people that are on the sidelines that have been waiting to get into the market are going to jump back into the market, and then the pendulum's going to swing right back up, and we might actually see the real inflation that everyone's been fearing. I just don't see that the recession, entre parenthèses, already happened.
It's, you know what? I agree with you. I agree that we haven't seen maybe the full impact of the recession just yet. Look, they just announced Bell Canada cutting all their rates. Sorry, look, we're always talking rates. Bell Canada cutting all these jobs,
Yeah.
which is close to 10% of their workforce.
Yeah.
Obviously, as a business, you have shareholders. You have to satisfy your shareholders. You're trying to gain as much profitability, as much profits as you can for your shareholders. And so naturally, the next thing that comes on is going to be job cuts,
Yeah.
right? In order to get that profitability. But I guess the bigger concern is, why are they losing revenue? And now you're starting to see this with a lot of companies. They're losing revenue. They're losing revenue. Well, inflation is one thing, sure, which the rate cuts have not done anything for, by the way. Maybe you feel the impact on real estate, but you're not going to, and I've discussed this a few times already, but you're not seeing them in our day-to-day. Inflation has not been corrected, so to speak. And is it going to be corrected? Does it need to be corrected? I think that's a whole different argument. But right now we're starting to see these things, and well, this might be impactful. And it's interesting because I've felt it's been super busy since early January. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's fruitful, but so many people are waiting.
Yeah.
They're on the sidelines. They want to pounce, and they're encouraged because they're like, you know what? The rates are going to go down. I can make decisions now, right? And for that reason, there are a lot of buyers in the market in comparison to last year. Now, it's a double-edged sword.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because the rates going down means the economy is going down, which means also buyers need to be a little bit conservative also. It's probably not the right thing for me to say as an agent, right? If I want to be, you know, usually an agent's job is to encourage people, is to say, no, it's going to be great, it's going to be fine. Yes, I feel like the overall environment right now is going to be conducive to buyers, right? But if it's conducive to buyers, it also means that we're in a market that is starting to shift
Yeah.
downwards. It did shift downwards last year, but last year buyers were not really in the market and sellers were still kind of staunch on their
Yeah.
pricing.
Yeah.
Now this year we have a lot more buyers.
Yeah.
Sellers are a little bit more willing, I want to say, but still they're conservative. It offers a little bit of an opportunity to buyers, but I'll tell you that the best time I saw for buyers was in the latter end, the last quarter of, or rather since August of 2023. Between August 2023 and mid-January is where I really saw people get deals. because I think that sentiment right before they announced that the prime rate was staying stable.
Yeah.
And I think that sentiment and that fear was still very pronounced and starting to be felt in that moment. So sellers were a lot more
Willing to,
willing.
yeah, absolutely.
And this was the time where I was able to squeeze more. Still, right now, we're negotiating. There is like even in multiple offers, we're seeing that people are still not necessarily going over asking, and they're not necessarily selling over asking, or if they do, it's really minimal.
What's moving on the market? What are you seeing that people want and that's coming into the market and exiting the market quickly?
I think,
Condos, houses, plexes.
single family homes have always been hotter than condos. But at the same time, condos were super flat over the last couple of years, including the pandemic. This is a very interesting thing because historically, I mean, downtown core usually is where prices keep going up because it's the center.
Yeah.
But I think that with the pandemic and the change of, working from home and all these things, it really took a whole different turn where the city center started to take a hit and all the suburbs started exploding. Right now, we're starting to see a shift again where the city center is starting to take value again, which wasn't necessarily the case just 2 years ago.
Do you think it's mainly like speculation, people buying thinking it's going to go back up, or people are deciding to live more in the city, like going back into their life before the pandemic?
People are going back to work.
Yeah.
Companies are imposing this on them now. So in a few instances, I have 2-3 deals I'm negotiating right now for condos. And these 2-3 deals is the same thing, where my clients are like, well, we wish we could have gotten something bigger, but the proximity to work is a real differentiating factor for them. And that is playing a role in what we're doing and how they're navigating the market. So if you're going to be downtown, if you're working downtown, well, now it makes a difference. I don't know if it's also related because we see, like, let's say smaller, less expensive condos in downtown too are starting to take more value. And probably because I think students are not actually going to university, where before it was distance learning, right? So these things are shifting. People are going back to work, people are going back to university, and so naturally the city center is starting to take value, right? But on the flip end, supply is still extremely high downtown because they built all of these condos in the last couple of years also. It's a balanced market, but I do see that there is more demand now downtown than there was in the last couple of years. So this is something that's interesting. But in general, right now, yes, I do feel like people are really looking, for single family homes. Always. Single family homes historically have always kind of gained more value in Montreal than condos alternatively. So there is that to consider. And multi-residential, I have a lot of clients who are always asking me about multi-residential. And they're all kind of waiting on the sidelines. The problem with multi-residential, I find, is that even though like that's the thing everybody looks for, the cap rates
They make no sense right now.
are still very high.
But you want to laugh. Even a few years ago, it feels like the cap rates never make sense.
No.
Like, I don't think anyone's ever bought a property and been like, you know what, that's a sick deal. I'm going to be cash flowing on this. Maybe in the 80s and 90s, but
But there
I've
was a
never felt
time.
anyone really felt excited.
Yeah.
It's always on the fact that, you know what, I'll bank on the fact that this property is going to be going up in value. I'll increase the rents. But it's true that now more than ever, cap rates make no sense.
The only way that these transactions make sense, and I tell people because so many people want to get a foothold in it. Sure. But they need to understand when you have limited capital, and in some instances people are telling me they have $1 million cash. And yes, there's things that we could do with that. There's properties we could buy. But what you're trying to get as a cap rate on that $1 million should be higher. Naturally. We're still not able to necessarily get that in this market. I do feel sellers are becoming a little bit more flexible, slightly. But the difference is that sellers of multi-residential often don't need to sell.
Yeah.
And where I actually have seen big deals happen was when you're buying pools
Mm-hmm.
of buildings. Then, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
if you're able to, and oftentimes it's a group who's doing this. So it's not one individual.
You're seeing less and less individual buyers out there
Yeah,
for deals to make sense. Like you're saying,
absolutely.
they're buying portfolios, buying the whole thing, like huge transactions.
There's a lot of partnerships out there right
Yeah.
now. And that's actually an interesting thing that I want to touch on because in Toronto and Vancouver right now, a lot of clients, I want to tell you maybe 10-15% of my sales in the last 2-3 years has come from outside of the province.
Really? Okay.
Toronto, Vancouver, a lot of clients have come to me from here and they don't live here, nor do they want to live here. But they're like, we want to buy in Canada
Mm-hmm.
and we're unable to buy in our cities. We are unable to buy in our cities unless we partner up with people, and we do not want to do this. So alternatively, what they do is they come to me and they say, buy it for us, manage it for us, rent it for us, and then in 3 to 5 years we'll sell it. And when I show them the things that they could buy,
They go
they're
crazy.
shocked.
Yeah.
They're shocked. Shocked, shocked, shocked. They're like, how?
But that's why I'm saying for us, the cap rates make no sense. But
Yeah.
every time you travel out of the province and you come back, it really makes you realize that, you know what, we're lucky and there's still so much room to grow. Montreal is the third most known city in Canada. So you have Toronto, you have Vancouver. Okay, we can argue there's Calgary and stuff like that, but Montreal really is the third biggest city. It makes no sense you can buy a condo in downtown Montreal, one of the most known cities in the world, for 400,000 or
No.
500,000. But for us, it feels like it's a lot because we still have in mind what the prices were 5-6 years ago, and we're like, I'm not going to pay 400,000 for something that was 325
Yeah.
3 years ago.
And in a couple of years then it's going to be like, oh well, that was a good deal. It's true that if we're comparing with our parents' time, yes, versus the incomes, property prices are quite high.
Yeah.
Supply and demand is a real thing, obviously, and for whatever reason people have this sentiment, the same way that people have a sentiment that multi-residential properties are going to take value, where oftentimes if you're just looking at pure finances, right, it may not give you the rates that you would otherwise expect. Let's not forget that you need to manage these buildings.
Yes.
There are costs associated to these buildings. So again, when it comes to multi-residential or any deal really, I am so conservative that when I look at it, and also having an accounting background, I'm even more conservative. Where I look at this, I'm like, well, inflation is, let's call it now 7%. You know what I mean? If I'm unable to gain that in value, then there's a problem. Now, yes, it's not so straightforward. If you're looking at a $5 million property, if it gains, 5%, it's significant. I understand. You know what I mean? But still, your expenses are going up just as much. And this is where you have to balance. Okay, well, how much equity growth are we going to have versus what the revenues are that they're giving us?
Yeah.
And it's a very hard divide because then you have to be very speculative. So people who do this regularly, they're a bit more comfortable to absorb that risk. But many people are coming in just getting into that market and saying, I want to do this. Well, it's not so straightforward. And you have to really know what you're doing, and then you have to be able to absorb that risk. And oftentimes I would tell you that if you're starting in any type of investment, if you're looking for a 3 or 4 or 5, 6 unit, if you're a first time buyer, go live in it.
Yeah. Makes sense. Absolutely.
Go live in it, manage your building, and work on that equity growth.
But that's what we're seeing a lot now. So for a lot of my younger clients that wanted to get into, for example, a single family home or a condo, when you crunch the numbers, it makes sense for them to go a bit outside the city into a duplex or a triplex to occupy one of the units, give a bit more value to the building, and then we'll revisit the discussion in 3 to 5 years if we refinance and then they get into a house. But if you have to be strategic about what you're buying for it to make sense, like you said, because even if you're buying a fiveplex or a sixplex and you're not living there, just the back and forth to manage your tenants and the issues they're going to be having is probably going to make you regret your investment.
And you have to know what your timeline is.
Yeah.
You have to say, okay, I'm willing to live here for X amount of years, right? So if you just got married and you're going to have a kid in a year, going into a studio in a multi-residential property is probably not the right approach, you know? And these are conversations. These are conversations, and again, it's a double-edged sword because on one hand, you might be able to secure a deal,
Yeah.
right? But on the other hand, we don't know how the market is going to flow. That's what will work to your benefit, and it could also work against you. But just like anything, you can never time the market.
Yeah.
So if you want to do something, then as long as you have a plan and a timeline, then I think that's what's really important.
Question for you.
Tell me.
Actually, double-sided question.
Sure.
Right now, between all the types of properties that you're seeing, what type of property would you say is the best deal to purchase right now? And two, in what region? So like you said, during the pandemic, a lot of like the areas around Montreal got really hyped.
Yeah.
What is the reality now? Like, where would you recommend someone that wants to get into the market or want to buy a good deal? What type of property and what area should they be looking at?
So again, I think it comes down to what, your current circumstances are in your life. Where do you work? What are your plans in the next 3 to 5 years? How important is commute? How important is public transportation? Those are questions that we need to ask ourselves. And then now, thankfully too, the dynamic of the city has shifted and changed. Just 10 years ago, it was very difficult to get from the city center to, let's say, the South Shore to an extent, you know what I mean? Getting to Delson, getting to Saint-Constant wasn't so straightforward. Now with the REM going from Brossard, there's a lot of buses that are going straight to the REM, which allows people from Delson, Saint-Constant, all these areas to actually go, to these to take public transportation straight downtown. Takes them to Central Station, Gare Bonaventure. Now, same thing with the West Island. I mean, we had trains. Now the REM is being linked to further areas.
But do you feel like the value of the properties now already takes in consideration the fact that the REM goes there?
I think in some of these areas, yes. Like especially, let's say if you're looking at Brossard, well, a lot of the value of that area has gone up over the last couple of years in anticipation for the REM. Same situation has happened in the West Island. And these areas now are no longer suburbs. These are city centers. Like to me, they are just a part of the city. They're an extension of the city, kind of like how Toronto is in a sense. Now, suburbs, you're looking at, let's say Vaudreuil, if you're looking at west, Vaudreuil, Perrault, Saint-Lazare, right? These are now considered more suburbs. Or if you're going more north, if you're going to Blainville, if you're going to Rosemère, these are considered suburbs, right? South, now, Saint-Constant, Delson, to me, are considered suburbs. But Brossard and West Island proper, to me, are no longer suburbs, even Laval.
Yeah.
Because you have Montmorency Metro over there, right? It's no longer a suburb. You are part of the city if you're in Laval, right? But you go any further than that, now it becomes.
Thank you for saying this
Yeah.
about us. Now. I feel like I'm in downtown now.
I know you're a Laval boy, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Newly
Born and
transferred.
raised, right?
No. Actually, I'm a Huntsic kid. Like 99% of Lebanese people that get here went through Degir, the whole buildings there, everything.
Yes.
A Huntsic, and then made my way to nicer pastures.
Very nice. Where did you go to school?
I went to school in West Island, actually. Yeah, I went to Collège Beaubois.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
West Island, and then
where I went, there was a lot of Lebanese people.
So where I went, there was
Right.
no Lebanese people. I was the brownest kid in my school.
I was at Marceline in my elementary.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Many Lebanese people over
Yes.
there. Right.
Yeah, so actually we were neighbors, school neighbors. So
Yeah.
yeah, Beaubois, like back then, the whitest school ever. I actually started seeing immigrants in CEGEP.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
You know, Collège de Montréal was my high school, and over there too many immigrants. But it's the first high school in all of Montreal, so it's like over 300 years old, right?
really?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't know that.
So Collège de Montréal was my high school. Man, we had so much fun over there, honestly. And I look back at it, I don't know how like I feel now. My kids go to school, and I feel like they've become so conservative, maybe in a sense, but it's a whole different dynamic right now,
Hmm.
you know. So I don't know if these kids are going to be able to have the fun we had. It's probably better that they don't have the fun we had, actually, right? But
Oh, now you see it in a different perspective. So now you're in the dad seat.
yes, I see it as really in a different perspective, and I look back at it and I'm like, wow, like yeah, some of the things were a little extreme back then, but we had a lot of fun, and now I hear that the school has progressed to much more than when we were there, and it's always kind of like that. They get to, and you're like, well, when we were there, we couldn't take advantage of these things, you know. Right now, I hear they have a hockey program
Really?
which we didn't have, right?
Hmm.
So these are cool things, man. And it's so, it's my 20-year high school reunion this year.
Wow. Okay.
It's
Do,
so
do,
crazy
when you remember
for me to
Korea
think.
from 20 years ago, for sure everyone dreams of the moment they get back to high school, probably like what car you wanted
Oh
to get back
man,
there. Like, are you where you envisioned yourself being in 20 years?
you know what? I don't know. You know, I've always been the kind of guy who like just is focused on progress. And if you ask anybody who went to high school with me, I've always been passionate about real estate. And some of these guys tell me now, like some of my friends are like, how did you know something about real estate? Right?
You knew you wanted to become a real
Yes,
estate
I
agent?
didn't know I wanted to be a real estate agent, so to speak,
Yeah.
but I knew that my future would be in real estate.
So what? Sorry, we'll
Yeah, yeah.
just do a quick like in
Yeah, yeah.
parentheses because I do want to know you studied in accounting
I did.
and then you worked at a bank. What made you say, you know what, I want to become a real estate agent?
So,
And
uh,
then sorry, then we'll get back to the other question. I
yeah,
told you I actually want to know if you're happy with where you are right now.
you know, again, there was something about real estate, and then I would kind of see these successful people in real estate, and I'd see how they navigated, and that I'm like, wow, I had met a couple of people who were in the business, who owned buildings. I think just that the way they were, I was very kind of drawn to this. And they would describe their building. And I remember there was a builder that I met in Sec 4. He's like, why don't you come and see my building? I met him. I met him through my parents, actually.
Okay, because I was gonna say just a random guy that
Yeah.
he's a kid. He's like,
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
what? How about you
Oh,
come see my building?
he's like, come see my building. It's very nice. So he said, come see my building. And I went and checked it out. And this was the first time that I had seen the bones of a building being built. It was so fascinating to me because you don't really, even as a kid, you don't really understand what's happening.
Hmm.
Now you're seeing all the pillars and you're seeing all the concrete and you're seeing kind of everything unfold. You're like, wow, this is like it's big. You know,
Yeah.
like I think it's just that, you know, the grandioseness of it, right? You get in there and you're like, wow, like something was built here.
That's crazy to think someone had an idea. There was nothing here, and then a few months down the line, like it's something, like
It's
something that
something.
takes a lot of work and energy to
It's
put up.
something.
Yeah.
And to me, that was, I think, one of the first experiences I had. And I'm like, I have to get into this world
Hmm.
somehow. And then in college, you know, go, you leave private school and you go to college, right?
Yep.
And and that freedom takes its own toll, right? Oh God, we gotta be careful what we say here.
I'm not talking, I'm listening.
You're asking the right and wrong questions at the same time. But you leave private school, which is a very closed environment. I mean, I was telling you we had so much fun there, but I mean, it's still a closed environment. And now freedom takes its toll. So college hits and lots of distractions, right? And nothing too stupid, right? Like nothing crazy, but you're young kid, you're kind of exploring, you're meeting people, and
Mhm.
you know,
That's gonna be for the midnight version of the podcast. After hours.
I wasn't expecting that question, and nor did I want to drift off to this. But so in college, I kind of just explored different things. You know what I mean? And I started up in health science, right?
Really?
I did. I
Okay.
did.
You went for it.
I went for it because, that's what the parents want,
Yeah.
and as a Persian, you have to be an engineer or a doctor,
Yeah.
right? And hence why you have like 90% of the engineering workforce are Persians over here, right? Doesn't matter what kind of engineer, but if you're an engineer, there's a 9 out of 10 chance that you're Persian, right? So I didn't quite know. So I went into health sciences and I started off in that. And I wasn't quite sure the avenue I wanted to take. And I had this idea in my head that, oh, I'll become a doctor. I'm going to have my own practice because for me, I always wanted to go into business. And through that practice, I'm going to buy real estate because this is kind of what was happening in my head. Again, because real estate was at the forefront of everything I was thinking. And, then that took a turn because I hated biology. Like I was not into it. And
Mhm.
once I got to organic chemistry, I'm like, fuck this. You know what I mean? Like I cannot do this anymore. So calculus was something I was very good at. Math is something I was very good at. And so I'm like, you know what? Let me go into commerce. And that's kind of where college finished for me. It was with commerce, and once I graduated, I'm like, you know what? Who am I kidding? I did not graduate. I
Oh,
did not
okay.
graduate college. Okay.
Really?
Yeah, like not many people know this, but I'm always like careful because I'm like my parents are gonna fucking kill me, right? But
I hope that's not the first time
yeah,
they're hearing it.
I don't think they actually know, to be honest, right? But
Okay.
I did graduate university, okay? So we're good now. We're good. But I didn't finish
Now
college.
your mom's gonna hate me.
Yeah. I didn't finish college. And it's actually so stupid, the reason why I didn't finish college, because I was missing 2 French classes and a gym class. And
Really.
that's what
You
was,
just couldn't go and finish your gym class?
uh, I was, again, college, man. I'm not gonna, I don't want to get into
The French classes, okay,
it.
but just gym class.
I did enough French class, and like all my life, I went to French. I'm like, screw this. I don't want to do this anymore. And gym class, it was just inconvenient timing, right?
Friday morning after
It was
like a
always
close blast.
something. Like Fridays, you typically try to take the day off, and then you go out with your friends, and you're kind of just enjoying life. And I was at John Abbott, so we would always go to like the restaurants that were over there, and anyways. But like I said, freedom in college and things kind of take a turn. I did, in theory, for me, I feel like I graduated because I'm like, these are stupid
And
classes,
that's what
anyways.
counts.
And that's what counts. But in that moment, instead of finishing, what I decided to do is go and do my real estate license
Before university.
before
Okay.
university. So I went, there was a 4 month intense, and I'm 18. Sorry, am I? No, I'm 19 at this point. I'm 19 and I'm taking this class. 4 months intense. I got my residential, commercial, business, and mortgage brokerage license in those 4 months. Every day, like going to LaSalle College and everything. This is where my real estate journey really started.
Okay.
And you'll be happy to know that I actually started as a mortgage broker at Municipal.
Have you really?
Yeah, I did that for a year. And then I moved on to real estate.
Okay.
Now, I mentioned to you that I did not finish commerce, right? I did
Yeah.
not I almost finished it. I actually finished commerce. If we're like looking at it very seriously, I did all my math classes, I did all my commerce classes, I did all my psychology
They
classes.
should just give you your diploma just right.
But the two
Like
French
aesthetics, just
classes
missing gym class.
and the gym class left. So basically, from there, I I got myself a dog.
Okay.
Okay. When I was in real estate, I started like as a realtor. And then in this process, I made zero sales at 20 years old. Zero sales. And you're 20 years old. Who wants to work with a 20-year-old real
Yeah.
estate agent? Let's be honest.
It's tough
It's
for young
tough.
people as a first career. It's extremely tough if you don't have a backing or someone behind
You know,
you.
they see this kid with spiky hair, you know, and I'm like, I am businessman. I know what I'm talking about. No, I did not. I don't have an accent, so I don't know why I did that. But that was kind of the impression that I have of myself now that I look back at it. And I'm like, who the hell did you think you were? You know what I mean? And in retrospect, I should have probably joined the team. But, you know, I did have a mentor, you know, Ali, right? So
From the beginning.
from the beginning,
Okay.
yes. But I didn't last very long in real estate that first year. And this is where I'm like, okay, now I got myself a dog. And now, you know, my mom's like, you're not bringing this dog in my house.
Okay.
So now I got to figure out a place to live.
Wow.
And, you know, because I'm not getting rid of my dog, right?
Okay.
And it's the same dog I have today.
Really?
Yes, right. So at this point, I guess I was 21, right? And so I decided, I'm like, maybe go back to university, right? And I had to do a few electives because of the stupid French classes and the gym class I didn't do. So I took some electives and I started my journey. And during this time, I'm like, you know what? It's not going to work. So I left real estate.
But you kept your license.
I kept my license. I kept my license. I would basically keep it on hold and renew it and all that stuff. And now, my parents were adamant too. And at this time, I went to the bank. I was at the bank, and then the bank took its toll. And from there, I was in university, and I started off in finance. I moved on to accounting because I'm like, oh, maybe accounting is going to open more doors for me, whatever. And then I'm at the bank, and 1 year passes, 2 years, 3 years, now 4 years. Now I'm graduating.
Yeah.
And during that year, I was number 4 in Quebec for sales. Okay,
At BMO.
at BMO. And to make a long story short, I basically needed to make a decision because now I'm invited at the gala. I'm top 5, and I'm getting a promotion, and now I gotta go to the next steps. And I get my promotion, you know, the week after the gala, and it's such a shit like increase in revenue. And I remember, you know, that year, like when you look at the millions of dollars that you brought to the bank, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, what the hell are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Now, by this point, I'm 24. Okay. So I'm 24 years old. I'm getting married in 6 months.
Okay.
Right. And I look at, you know, my fiance at the time, now my wife. I tell her, yeah, I'm not going to take the promotion. I'm going to resign instead.
How did she take that?
She looks at me, she's like, what do you mean? And I had always told everyone, I'm like, look, I'm leaving real estate when I was 21. I'm leaving real estate, but I'm going to come back.
Okay, you always knew it was something you
Yeah.
were going to get back to.
Right? But a lot of things happened at the same time.
Yeah.
I got my new job, and I went to university. I had my dog, you know, and I got my new place. All these things happened at the same time. And, you know, this is where like I had that as a plan B because I'm like, well, you should probably have something as a plan B. And now your parents are also like hounding you.
Yeah.
Right. So let's just, you know what I mean? And, you know, not to say anything, but, you know, I was dating my wife now, right? We were dating, and I'm like, well, her parents are probably going to want me to have some kind of an education,
Most
right?
probably, yeah.
Most probably. So I'm like, you know what? Let's just take this for good measure. But all this to tell you that at that point, I'm like, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to work for a corporate institution who's going to basically look at me as a number, and in 20 years, 30 years, I'm probably going to no longer be valuable and
Hmm.
move on. So
It was never an option to move up the ranks or get
yeah,
to a
I
certain
thought about
position.
it, but then I'm like, I'm doing all this for another institution. Why don't I put this effort into my own business?
Hmm.
And seeing as how real estate was always kind of in the back burner. So for a moment, I had thought that until I got that promotion. And I'm like, this is not going to really work out for me. So my wife was actually quite supportive. And she told me, she's like, look, I don't know what's going on in your head. So far you've been able to make things work. I don't want you to be 40 years old and regret not making this decision. So do it, but we're getting married in 6 months. I'm like, yeah, we're still getting married. Don't worry.
You want to laugh? It was actually the same conversation I had with my wife. We were already married, but when I told her it was cold turkey, I came in a day and I'm like, you know what? I'm not gonna work as a notary anymore. It took a few hours to get her to understand, but it's so important to have someone that
But
actually.
she can't back out, right? My wife could have still backed out, right?
So you have a good one there.
Maybe you were smarter.
I locked her in
Yeah, you
before.
locked her in. You're like, you know what? I'm gonna lock her in. In a couple of years,
I'll break it down.
I'll break it down to her. Like once my notarial business doesn't take off, she'll see. But little did you know,
Unfortunately.
you took it to the next level.
So she was good with you going for the move. You went for it.
Look, she was okay. She was okay with me doing it. She was worried, obviously. She's like, how are we going to live? Right.
Yeah.
And I'm like, look, don't worry. We'll figure it out. This, little cocky, arrogant kid. Right. Like I was never an arrogant kid, but, I was very like confident. I'm like, I'm going to make this work. And from there, basically, 1 month pass. 1 month passes, 2 months pass, 3 months pass. And I'm hustling hard. You have to understand. And it's like nothing's closing. I'm trying to get a buyer. It's hard. I finally land a buyer who's like really like wanting to work with me. And what a and that was my first transaction. It was in the South Shore actually, in Brossard. And I remember that it was like such a challenge to get that deal done. And the check was $4,500 once the commission was done. But my God, one of my most proud moments. And that check only covered like everything that I spent over the previous months,
Yeah.
right? But that first commission check put it in like my mind that
It
I could
felt
do
it
this.
felt real. Is
I,
it like how a lot of people say like that first when they got that first check, something clicked, something happened, or was it not as
100%. Yeah, because I'm like, I could do this.
yeah?
Look,
Was it worth
I
all the
just did it.
work? Like, what was actually your feeling when you got that first pay? You're like 4,500. I've been working X number of months. Did you feel I can see myself doing this more than working
Yeah.
at the bank every day?
You know why? Because it was all me.
Yeah.
I had no one on top of me. I didn't, when you're also an employee, a lot of times you're getting paid, but you're like, am I really worth this? Like it goes through your mind,
Yep.
right? Like, did I really do enough for this amount? And then on the flip end, sometimes like I did too much. And that's what happened to me.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I'm like, okay, I got myself to be top five. I wasn't number one, but I was number four, a modest number four. And I'm like, I should be worth much more than this. And the thing that really clicked in my mind was at the time it was $45,000 at that time, right?
Your bonus?
No, my
Because I
bonus
was gonna say you're crazy if you.
my bonus was $12,000, but the
Okay.
the increase in revenue
Got it.
was maybe like $9,000,
Wow.
and then I
Okay.
had like a bonus of $12,000 or whatever it was. Still, I looked at this and I'm like, what the
That's
hell?
three commissions basically.
Right.
Like when you're putting in perspective,
Yes.
yeah.
Like in my head, I'm like, well, I should be able to make this work. And for me, that's what it was. But also, you look at sometimes, like on the flip end, there are people who are working 9 to 5s, and it's like, are you worth that amount, right? And everybody always thinks they're worth more
Of
than they
course.
are. But
Yeah.
once you actually make money 100% on your own, and that money is earned because you had to go get
Yeah.
it, it changes the dynamic of things.
Yeah.
It's no longer that I'm being paid no matter what I do.
Yeah.
Because you'll be on vacation and be paid. I'm on vacation, I'm not paid unless I close something on vacation, which my wife jokes about it, but she says we should go on more vacations because I'm always closing something while we're on
Well, there
vacation.
you go. That's a good way to put it.
I mean,
She's a good salesman. You should hire her.
I know, but now it gets frustrating to her, right? Like the first times when you were going on vacation, you close something, it was exciting.
Yeah.
Now I don't want to say that it's inconvenient, right? But it's inconvenient to her. It's part of my business, right?
Yeah.
Now we wouldn't have it any other way, but yes, I can never detach, nor do I want to, and that's kind of a part of, the nature of things in this business. You know what I'm happy about though? I think I finally solved this issue I've been having with the cameras.
You did?
Yeah, the problem. Yeah. We're back.
It's a whole production here, by the way. I'm not surprised. Like I
Yeah.
said, I wouldn't expect anything less from you, but geez.
You know what? I've always believed if you're going to do something, do it completely, do it full, or don't do it at all.
I know you got a whole wardrobe for the podcast, so I believe you.
Yes, I did. I did change my wardrobe a little bit. I went a little crazy. I actually went to my suit guys at Suitably. I'm gonna give them a little shout out. So these guys are my suit guys. They do made to measure suits, and I wanted blazers, I wanted suits, and a couple of things like that. And every time I go, like, why don't we start with one, and then we can and I'm like, guys, I'm here now. Let's go for 10. Look at me. They're like, are you sure? Like, what happens if it's not a perfect fit? And you know what?
But they did a really good job.
They
have to
did.
say.
They did. So, imagine it doing all of these, and then they're like, it's going to be hard for us to retailer it because they could retailer it.
So if you did 10 suits, you need at least 10 episodes.
I need at least 10
and
episodes.
That made it worth it.
Did I mention this is episode 8, by the way? I don't know if I did.
You did, yeah.
I did. And it's such a pleasure having you. And, we've actually been behaving a little bit because
we're keeping it very classy.
we're trying not to go too extreme with it. Because these days you don't know what's appropriate or inappropriate, but
your editor will fix everything that needs to
he's
be
gonna
fixed.
fix that out. But I'm really happy because I'll tell you something. I've been having these stupid problems with this gear, right, over the last couple of episodes, where the things keep shutting down, right? So if you're listening to the past couple of episodes, you might not notice it, but I've had some real technical difficulties there. And it's so frustrating because you're like, what the hell is going on? And I just realized today, last episode, I'm like, it can't just be shutting off, right? I'm like, something else is at play. And the power banks that are attached to them were basically off every time. Something so simple. And now today we've been going for an hour. Watch me jinx it now. Everything's going to fall apart. But no, now it's been kind of going on the whole time. So let's see if this changes anything.
We'll cross our fingers.
We'll cross our fingers. But tell me something. I wanna hear something about Amin, and I want to know where you were. Now you heard. I mean, I didn't get into detail, nor will I get into detail because that was just a different time of my life, and it was before my wife also. So it was just those are times that you're just gonna kind of brush on from. But I know that you, like me, also have been with your wife for quite some time, right?
Yep.
I started dating my wife after college. I think you guys met in college. Is that right?
Yep.
And now tell me where Amin Khoury was basically before Amin Khoury was Amin Khoury Notary. And I know a little bit about it. I've never gone into detail, but I think it's an interesting
You're
story.
forcing me to answer, basically.
Hey, listen, I think I've exposed myself more than I needed to today also, so why don't we go for it?
So, well, to put it very simply, there's a reason I have no social media. So back then there was only Facebook, around 2010, 2011. And I worked in nightclubs for a few years. Yeah. And then when I finished and became,
So Lebanese of you.
you have to,
You have
you
to.
have to. So when I ended up finishing, getting my degree and starting off as a notary, I'm like, okay, I'll just close my Facebook page altogether because obviously,
Yeah.
nothing crazy. Just that's not what you want people to see when they're looking you up and trying
No.
to find their notary.
Yeah.
And so that's it. So I worked in clubs. I actually always had that dream that I'm going to start a business and it's going to explode. So I have like a trail of businesses behind me that were started, some of them still ongoing, some of them that I can't discuss because of NDAs, others that are dead, finished
Yeah.
completely. But I always had like that dream of building something, having it grow, selling it, retiring, and like coasting away. And that's it. But before becoming a notary, it was a bit of a mishmash of everything, trying to find like a golden gem, a nugget, something that would make it big. And then working as a notary ended up being what allowed me to be able to invest more and to kind of get like the lifestyle that I wanted. But yes, so I've met my wife in college. We didn't start dating then. We started dating when I finished university, actually. So we had like a gap of 4 years. We were friends. We always kept.
Was that the prerequisite also? You know, like that little piece
Non,
of paper? No.
ça a juste adonné. So
Yeah.
when I finished, I actually studied in Sherbrooke. So when I finished university, I came back to Montreal to do my master's. It's the DDN, to be a diplôme de droit notarial,
Yeah.
which is what you need to become a notary. So I did it here at the University of Montreal, and then we started dating. And as a joke at first, so she was trying to get into optometry school, and we had a discussion about it because it was going to be hard and a long process for her to get into it. And I told her as a joke, I'm like, I'll keep working as a notary until you become an optometrist, and then I'll quit, and you'll make us live.
Is that kind of how it happened?
That's kind of what happened. But yeah, so basically when she became an optometrist, in the meantime, we got married, we bought a place together. And so like life kept going, and then she became a notary, super happy with her work. She worked super,
She became an optometrist.
Sorry, no. She became an optometrist, which is way better than becoming a notary.
See, I caught you there. Yes, I don't know if it's way better, but I do trust what you're telling me.
You want to know something funny? She had actually applied to Sherbrooke to go to law school with me.
Oh wow!
Back then, good thing she didn't. It's not made for her. Each person has like traits. So she became an optometrist. We've been together the whole time, and she helped me out tremendously. So even when I became a notary, it was so hard to actually get an internship. It wasn't like it is now. So back then, when you finish notary school, you had to do an internship. But notaries weren't as busy as they are now. Real estate wasn't what it is now.
No.
So it was extremely hard to find an internship, even if you had good grades. Notary offices didn't care because they didn't see the value in spending so much time training someone, because they knew in the end they couldn't keep the person because there wasn't that many offices that were big enough to be able to support staff. So actually, fun fact, when I negotiated my salary, entre parenthèses, for my internship, so I had a number in mind, and then obviously on the negotiation table, when it got to the point where they told me, they're like, what do you expect as a salary? So I think back then it was like $8 or $9. That was the like salaire minimum.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I went to law school. I have a master's degree. I think $15 an hour sounds baller. Like $15 an hour.
That's your baller.
That was
number.
my baller number. So the guy told me, he's like, we had more something along the lines of $100 a week in mind. So the negotiator that I am, I told him $125 a week, and that's what we settled on. So actually, my internship was paid $125 a week, which was barely enough to pay the parking on the carry. And that's where I met Matt, the owner of the agency. So around the
Oh,
same
wow.
time when I started my internship, I met Matt.
Isn't
That,
that funny?
yeah,
And that's
it is.
what allowed us to meet,
Yeah, absolutely.
right?
So I met Matt. He had just
What a
purchased.
privilege, by the way. What a privilege.
Likewise, thank
Yeah.
you. So he had just partnered up in the agency. It was still called Agat back then,
Yes.
and he sold it to me like it was the next big thing. I think he had 6 agents,
Yeah.
but he told me,
I
we're
guess he
growing
wasn't
fast.
wrong, right? But although, like, I'll have to say, Matt, I love you and everything, but like, Agat was a horrible name.
It was a horrible name, but
Agat
it
was
kind
a
of makes
horrible name.
made sense because when I asked them back then, like why Agat. So it's a semi-precious stone, so might as well call it diamond at that point, like
Yeah.
make it worthwhile.
I don't want to be semi-precious. I want to be precious.
But it was to actually, from what I understood, it was to show up higher in the search books, so dans les annuaires téléphoniques back then. So
Uh,
then you'd fall on Agathe. Obviously,
makes
this
sense.
marketing technique is irrelevant these days. But yeah, so that's where I met Matt, and he told me, he's like, look, we want a notary in the office. I had just started my internship, so I had a year to go. So he's like, if you don't want it, I have so many other people interested. He had no one else interested. I took the bait, went for it. So I was paying rent that was maybe 3 times more than what I was making a month back then. So when I finished my internship, I was actually indebted quite over my ears, but in the end, it all
It
worked
all
out.
worked itself
Yeah,
out.
and I really, actually, for me, being in the agency here is, I think, what really made my name in the business and what helped me out
Well,
the
look,
most.
I think that's one thing, but obviously, like that helps, right? Agents and everything, but realistically, it's the quality of the work that you put in, and that quality has followed you in mortgages as well. And I see it, and I see how passionate you are,
Thank you.
and I see the care that you put into your work, and I think it's that's what will always allow you to be successful no matter what you're doing. And you've done multiple businesses, right? Some might even call you a serial entrepreneur, and I know that, you've got real estate. We don't have to talk about it because I know maybe that it's not necessarily something we want to talk about today because you have partners and everything too. But, you're in the business and you see a lot of different things. And I feel like no matter what you're doing, you're always putting that quality in.
Well, my dad always told us your reputation is your business card.
Yes.
So that's really the way I approach everything. So Montreal is a small city.
Yes.
Everyone talks, everyone knows everyone. And if you're not always trying to be the best person that you can and being honest and actually working towards helping people, then really there's no point in being in this business because you won't last very long.
No. And you brought up something that was really important too. And I don't know if I finished on what I had said before, but yeah, the support of your partner, your girlfriend, your wife, whatever
Mhm.
it is so important when you're going into business. It's almost impossible for someone to really be able to stay focused if they know that if it goes down, you're going to be held responsible in a negative way, one way or another. These are decisions that you make as a couple, right?
Mhm.
As partners. And those decisions are basically made together.
Yeah.
So if it succeeds, then you'll only have yourselves to basically tap on the shoulder. And if it fails, you only have yourselves to blame. But it's not one person's fault or another.
100%. And it makes the whole difference because,
It makes all the
yeah,
difference.
it really, really helps going through everything as a team. And I really sincerely wish for everyone that's listening to be able to find someone that helps them through that. It's hard to go through all the motions alone because oftentimes, well, it's tough to always find a reason within yourself to push through. So when you have someone else to lean on or someone else to kind of have to look good for,
Yeah.
it kind of pushes outwards
Well,
the
it
your
pushes
reasoning.
you
Yeah.
because it's no longer just you.
Yeah.
First of all, you're responsible also. So I mean that pressure is there, but you can't. But again, those are decisions that are made together, and that support is vital.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And if there's one thing that I'm gonna like, I'm not saying I'm an example or you're an example or anything, but this is our experience. And I feel like if there's one thing I could tell anybody, especially when there are couples involved, and if there's somebody who has that fire to do something different, if you have that fire to become an entrepreneur, to open a business, and you're always afraid, I think that the risk of not doing it is much greater than the risk of doing it.
For sure.
And as a couple, especially, those are decisions you make together. But I would tell the significant other, whether it's the wife or the husband, that you need to support that person.
Yeah.
You need to allow for them to take those decisions and take that risk and take that flight. And you know what? I think you'd be surprised for what would come. And I think entrepreneurship, that's the beautiful thing about it. It's that once you start something, there are so many roads that are open to you
Yeah.
just because you're free in a way,
Yeah.
right? The thing that makes it risky is also the thing that makes it profitable.
And that's what makes it worth the risk. So
Yeah.
the easy path, you just move down step by step, and it's pretty much already your whole life is kind of drawn in front of you. Although even now with everything happening in the economy, even a safe job, you're not sure you're going to keep it. But trying to do your own thing, trying to be in business, any type of business, the reward is so huge because the risk is so huge. And in the end, what do you have to lose? If it doesn't work out, scratch it off and you restart again. Like, you can start unlimited times. Obviously, don't go bankrupt doing it. Be reasonable, but no reason not to give it a shot and going for it. Especially if you do have someone next to you that understands what you're going for and that supports you. Although it is going to be hard sometimes, I'm sure. For your wife, it wasn't always easy because it is a rocky road. It's not a straight line.
It is a rocky road. 100%. That's true. And I really hope that everyone who's listening and who wants to go and dive into that does it. And the sooner you do it, the better it is. And if it doesn't work out, you just go back to what you're doing. And so the risk is really, really
Not taking
limited.
the risk.
It's actually non-existent in my opinion.
Yeah.
So Amin Khoury,
Thank you so
notary,
much for
mortgage
having me.
broker, business entrepreneur. It's been a real pleasure having you, man.
It's been a pleasure coming here.
Yeah,
Thank
you know
you.
what? We'll do this again. We'll do this again. We're not we're not gonna get too wired up with things that have happened in the past. We brought up the past a little bit. I wasn't expecting it, but it is what it is. On that note, I mean, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being you, man. My clients are super happy too with you, with everything that you do. And I
Always a
appreciate
pleasure.
you. I appreciate you as a notary. I appreciate you as a mortgage broker. And I appreciate you most of all as a friend.
Thank you. Likewise.
Episode 8 is a wrap. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.